One might argue that a king who announces a maid as his Luna in front of his entire court has only himself to blame for the uproar that follows. But then again, if that court had troubled itself even once to learn the name of the girl who filled their cups, there would have been no uproar worth the name. So the fault, weighed properly, was theirs. Every last powdered and perfumed one of them. Nares of Sarnhold had not spoken aloud in 6 years, which the palace had long since stopped finding strange and started finding convenient. Great men argued grain prices and border tolls in front of her, and never once lowered their voices, because a wine jug does not repeat what it hears, and neither, they had all quietly agreed, did she. She kept the lower keys. Every barrel and bolt and sack. They came through the kitchen gate, went into the household ledger in her small, tidy hand, and had done since she was 15. Steward Farron said she had the best eye in Sarnhold. He said it the way a man praises a good horse, fondly and often, and she had built most of what she thought of herself out of that one sentence. Tonight, the great hall held 400 people, and Nares was carrying wine. The occasion was the naming feast. Twice in living memory, a wolf king of Halvorn had spoken the name of the woman he meant to raise beside him, and the realm had come to watch Emmerich do it a third time. Every unwed daughter of every house worth counting sat below him in her best silk, chin up, hands folded, waiting to hear herself called. Nares poured for them. It was the only reason she was there. "Careful, ladies!" Ossian, the youngest footman, came past her with a tray held high and a grin held higher. "Mind the mouse, she creeps. You'll turn round and there she'll be breathing at you." The table laughed. Ossian meant nothing by it, which was somehow the worst of him. He mocked her the way boys throw stones at water, for the noise, and would have been wounded to learn she remembered everyone. Bethany was worse, because Bethany was kind about it. She caught Nares at the serving screen, a hand on her arm, her face full of soft concern. "Oh, you poor thing. They've put you on the wine again," she said, low and warm and pitched exactly loud enough. "On tonight of all nights. Never mind. Somebody has to do the pouring, and it isn't as though you'd have anything to say to them." She squeezed Nares's arm. "Chin up, Mousie." Then she went to serve the sweet course with her face lit like a lantern. At the third table, Lady Voska of Oren did not laugh at all. She watched Nares fill her cup, watched her set it down, and said, in a voice like a filed edge, "Do you know, I find I prefer being served by her. One is not obliged to be gracious to furniture." The women around her went still, and then, one at a time, permitted themselves to smile. Nares bowed her head and moved down the table, and her face gave nothing away, because it had not given anything away in 6 years. Nobody in the hall knew she was working. She had counted 11 casks up from the cellar and watched 9 broached. The 2 left bore the Western housemark and had been set apart behind the screen where no server walked. The cellarman glanced at them twice, and then made a point of not glancing again. She filed it with the rest of that season, the deliveries that came light, the seals that came already broken, the 6 wagons of winter salt that went into the ledger and never came out. She would write it down before she slept. She always did. She had no idea what it meant. Then something made her look up. The king had set his cup aside, untouched. Emmerich of Halvorn sat at the high table, with a hall full of daughters arranged in front of him like a hand of cards, and he was not looking at a single one of them. He was looking at her, not past her. Not through her, the way a man looks at a piece of the wall. He was looking at her the way she looked at a delivery. She did not trust, steady and unhurried, and she understood, in a cold rush, that he was not doing it for the first time tonight. He had been watching her the whole evening. Nares had one clear thought, and it was that she should not be holding anything breakable. She set the jug on the sideboard. Around her the hall went on, 400 people rustling and murmuring in their silk, and none of them had noticed anything, and for a moment she let herself believe she had invented it. Then the king stood. The sound of a hall, that size falling quiet, is not a silence. It is a long collapsing hush that runs table by table to the doors, and it took perhaps 4 heartbeats, and Neres used every one of them to get herself back against the wall where the servers stood. "My lords," Emeric said, "my ladies, you have all come a very long way to watch me do one thing, and I am told it is unkind to keep you waiting." Laughter, warm and immediate. He had a voice built for a room. That much everyone knew about him. "I am also told," he went on, "that a king ought to choose the woman who will stand at his side by her house, her blood, and the strength of her father's holdings." He let that sit. "I have read the arguments. They are very fine arguments. I am afraid I have gone another way." Along the third table, Lady Vasca of Orin lifted her chin a fraction, and Neres, who noticed everything, noticed that. "There is a woman in this hall," the king said, "who has never once lied to me, who has carried the keys of this house since she was a girl and never used them for herself, who knows more about how Sarnhold actually runs than every man on my council put together, and who has never been thanked for a day of it." He turned his head. "I would rather have her than a treaty." 400 people began, very slowly, to look where he was looking. "Neres of Sarnhold," said the king, "will be your Luna." There is a particular quality to the noise a great hall makes when it does not believe what it has heard. It came up in pieces. A cup went over near the door. A woman laughed, once high and startled, and stopped as though slapped. Somebody said the word "maid," and somebody else said it louder. And then the whole room was saying it at different speeds. Bettany had both hands over her mouth. Ocean had gone the color of a fish. Lady Vasca did not move at all. She sat with her wine untouched in front of her and looked at Neres down the length of the hall. And there was nothing on her face, and that was somehow more frightening than the noise, and the noise was coming closer. That was the thing nobody warns you about. It began at the high table, and it rolled outward, and every head it passed turned with it, until 400 faces had swung round onto a maid standing against a wall, with a serving cloth over her arm, and the whole weight of Halvorn came down on her like a door in a wind. The king was waiting, he was smiling, and under the smile he was waiting the way a man waits who has just put everything he has on the table. They were all waiting. Neres opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Nothing had come out in 6 years. She did not remember leaving the hall. She remembered the screen, and the passage behind it, and the cold of the kitchen stair coming up through her shoes. And then she was sitting on an upturned crate in the scullery with her hands flat on her knees, breathing the way Ferran had taught her to breathe when she was small and the world got loud. They found her within the hour. They always found her. There she is. Ossian came down the steps, 2 at a time. There she is. Neres. Neres. He stopped in front of her and stared as though she had grown a second head, which in a manner of speaking she had. "Do you know what you've done?" She had not done anything. That was the difficulty. She had stood by a wall and been pointed at. "They're saying he's ill," said Bettany, arriving behind him with 3 other maids in tow, all of them wide-eyed and none of them looking away. "That's what they're saying upstairs. That he's taken a fever or been got at, because no king in his right mind would end." "Oh, Mousy, I don't mean that unkindly." She said it while checking round the others, to be sure they had heard her say it. "I only mean it's very strange." "That's all anyone means." "House Oren's already gone," said one of the others. "All of them. Carriages at the north gate, torches lit, in the middle of the night. Lady Vasca hasn't said a word to anybody." "The Western lords are still in the yard arguing," said Ossian. "Arguing about her." He looked at Neres with something that was almost awe and almost fear, and could not decide which it wanted to be. "Half of them think it's a joke he'll take back in the morning." Neres looked at the floor. She had spent 6 years making herself into a thing that could not be discussed, and it had taken Emeric of Halvorn 7 words to undo it. Enough. The scullery emptied the way a puddle empties, all at once, and without dignity. Steward Farron came down the last 3 steps and stood with his hands folded, a spare gray man of 50-odd years, with ink on his fingers, and he waited until the last set of footsteps had gone up before he spoke again. "Look at me, girl." She did. "Is it true?" She nodded once. Farron closed his eyes. For a moment he did not look like the steward of a royal house at all. He looked like a man who has heard a noise in the night and knows exactly which of his own walls it came from. "Then, listen to me," he said, "because we may not have long, and there is nobody else in this palace who will tell you the truth of it." He crouched down so that they were level, which he had done since she was 15, and which had always meant that what came next was going to be hard and honest. "You are not in luck. You are in danger." She frowned. "He has raised a woman with no house and no name, over 400 people, who have both." Farron's voice was very quiet and very steady. "Every one of those daughters was promised something tonight by a father who has spent 4 years and a great deal of money getting her here. Every one of those fathers is standing in the yard right now working out what it cost him. And they cannot be angry with a king. He let that land, so they will be angry with you." Nerys pressed her hands flat against her knees. "Do you know what happens to a girl in this house, who cannot be sent away and cannot be argued with?" he said. "She has an accident on a stair. She takes ill in the night. And every lord in that yard says how very sad, and goes home, and the matter is closed by spring." She looked up sharply. "And if it is a jest," Farron went on, "if he stands up tomorrow and laughs and takes it back, then you are the maid who let a hall of 400 believe she was to be Luna. And there is no coming back down from that. You would not be a servant here again. You would not be a servant anywhere." His jaw worked. "I brought you into this house. I have kept you in it. There are things I have protected you from, Nerys, more than you will ever know. This is not one of them." She looked at him and thought, as she had thought 100 times, that he was the only wall she had. He put his hand on her shoulder, briefly the closest he ever came. "Say nothing," he said, and then heard himself, and something crossed his face. "Do nothing. Do not go up. Let it burn itself out overnight, and in the morning we will find out which kind of king we are dealing with." He straightened. "Sleep, if you can. I will be awake." Then the bell rang. Farron's head came up. It was the household bell, the one that hung at the top of the kitchen stair, and it was rung by the steward and by nobody else ever, in the whole history of the house, and Farron was standing in front of her with both hands at his sides. It rang a second time, unhurried, as though whoever had hold of the rope had all night. He did not move. Nerys watched the color go out of his face and understood that there was exactly one person in Halvorn who could put a hand on that rope and not answer for it. Somebody was coming down into the kitchens. Somebody who did not need the steward's leave to do it. Kings do not come down into kitchens. There is no rule about it written anywhere, because there has never needed to be. Emeric of Halvorn came down into the kitchens. He came down the stair the way he did everything, unhurried, one hand trailing the rope of the household bell, as though he had only rung it to see what would happen, and he stopped at the bottom and looked round the scullery with open interest at the racks and the copper and the stone sink worn into a shallow bowl by 90 years of hands. "So this is where it all goes on," he said. Farron bowed so low it looked painful. "Your Majesty, forgive us. If I had known you meant to come below, I would have had the place made ready. Then I am very glad you did not know." The king pushed a crate around with his boot and sat down on it, which put him lower than both of them. And Nerys watched Farron's face do something complicated. "Steward, you have had a long night, and I am about to give you a longer one. Go up and find out which of the western lords are still in my yard, and which have gone quietly. I want it before dawn, Majesty. The girl is in my charge." "She is," Emeric agreed pleasantly. For the moment. The two of them looked at one another for slightly longer than was comfortable, and Nerys, who had spent 6 years learning to read rooms she was not permitted to speak in, understood that something had just been said that had nothing to do with the words. Farron went. The scullery was suddenly very small. Nerys stood beside her crate, with her hands folded in front of her, because that was what one did, and waited to be spoken at. "Sit down," the king said. "Please. You have been on your feet since 5 this morning." She had. She had no idea how he knew that. She did not sit. She reached instead into the pocket of her apron and took out the slate. It was a child's slate, 4 fingers wide, worn smooth at the corners, and there was a nub of chalk on a string. She used it, perhaps twice a month for numbers, when the ledger and a pointed finger would not do. She wrote 3 words and turned it round. "Take it back." Emmerich read it. He did not laugh, which she had braced for, and he did not soften, which she had braced for harder. "No," he said. She rubbed the slate against her sleeve and wrote again. "You must. I must not. And I will not, and I want you to understand the difference." He leaned forward, with his forearms on his knees. "If I stand up tomorrow and say I misspoke, then every man in that yard learns that the word of the king of Halvorn lasts 1 night. I would be finished by autumn. Not deposed, worse. Managed." He tipped his head. "And you would be finished by Tuesday. Farran will already have told you that." She said nothing, which was easy. "So we will not be taking it back," he said. "We will be making it true." She stared at him. "Tomorrow at noon I will stand in the same hall," Emmerich went on, "and I will tell my court that the crown has known your name since before you came to this house. That you were placed at Sarnhold as a ward under my protection, and that the arrangement was kept quiet for reasons that are the crown's business and no one else's. Nobody will believe it. That is not the point. The point is that it is a story with a king's name on it, and a man cannot call it a lie without calling me one." Nerys's hands had gone cold around the slate. She wrote fast and turned it round. "That is not true." "No," he said. "I am a maid. You are the best eye in this house," said the king. "And I did not get that from the steward. I got it from watching." She wrote nothing. She could not think of what to put. 11 casks came up tonight," Emmerich said. 9 were broached. 2 were set behind the screen, with the western mark on them and no server working that ground, and you looked at them 4 times over the course of the evening and never once let your face do anything about it. He watched her. "I have been in that hall 300 times. I have never seen anybody count anything." Then I started watching the girl with the wine, and the girl with the wine was counting everything. The chalk had made a white smear along the edge of her thumb. She looked at it rather than at him. "I am not going to explain myself tonight," he said, standing. "You have had enough thrown at you for 1 evening, and I would rather you were angry with me when you were rested. Go to bed. Somebody will come for you at noon." He was at the foot of the stair before she moved. She held up the slate, and when he turned, she had written 1 word. "Why?" Emmerich looked at it for some time. "Because I am running out of people I can trust," he said, "and you are the only one in this palace who has never once asked me for anything." Then he said, "Good night, Nerys." And he said it correctly. The soft opening and the short second half. The way her mother had said it and nobody in 6 years had bothered to. And he went up the stair and left her standing in the scullery with her mouth open around a word she had no way of making. It took her some minutes to remember the slate in her hand. When she looked down at it, the chalk had been used, beneath her 1 word, in a fast slanted hand, that had not been there when she gave it to him. Somebody had written 3 more. "Bring the ledger." He did exactly what he said he would do, which she had not expected, because nobody ever did. At noon the hall was fuller than it had been for the feast, because scandal travels faster than invitations. Nerys stood at the foot of the dais, in the plain grey she had been given an hour earlier, and Emmerich told the whole of that hall the story of the crown's quiet ward, and told it well, and did not blink once. Nobody believed a word of it. But by the time he had finished, the western lords had come in from the yard, and Lady Voska of Oren, who had left in the night with her torches lit, had turned her carriages round on the north road and come back. She stood at the side of the hall in her traveling cloak, arms folded, her face like a closed door. Nerys had been Luna for 14 hours, and she had already learned the first rule of it: nothing is ever settled, it is only postponed. Afterwards he found her in the counting room off the kitchen passage, where she had gone because it was the only room in Halvorn nobody else wanted. "You brought it," he said. She had. The ledger sat on the table between them, the current year and the two before it. "Good." He shut the door with his heel. "Now tell me I am wrong about something." She looked at him. "You have been standing at the edge of my house for 6 years, thinking that nobody sees you," Emmerich said. "I want you to consider the possibility that you have been wrong about that, and that it has cost you a great deal." She reached for the slate. "I am nobody. You are the only person who knows what comes through my gate. Anybody could count. Anybody could." He pulled out a chair and sat down backwards on it, which no king in any portrait had ever done. "Nobody has. For 6 years, nobody has. That is not a small thing you are holding, Nerys. That is the only honest record in this kingdom, and I am fairly certain it is the reason somebody in this house has started being careful." She stopped with the chalk halfway to the slate. "Show me," he said. So, she showed him. She had meant to be brisk about it. She got as far as the second page, and forgot to be anything at all, because it had been 6 years since anybody had asked her a question, and then waited for the answer. She turned the ledger round and set her finger on the salt. 6 wagons, the autumn before last. In at the kitchen gate, weighed and marked, and entered. She turned forward 11 pages and showed him the winter stores, and the salt was not in them. She turned forward again and showed him the requisition sent up to buy more of it, in the spring, at a bad price. Emmerich did not say anything for a while. "We bought our own salt back," he said. She nodded. "How many times has that happened?" She held up her hand and closed it and opened it twice. 10. He sat back. "In how long?" she wrote. 4 years. "And you told the steward," she wrote, "every time." And the steward said. Then she wrote, "It goes up the chain." "Ah," Emmerich's mouth twisted. "It does. And I have been sitting at the top of that chain for 6 years, being told that we are simply an expensive house to run. Do you know, I have 3 men on my council, whose entire function is to tell me things, and none of them have ever told me anything as useful as 1 page of your handwriting." Nerys felt something turn over in her chest, and she did not care for it at all. "Right." He stood up. "Walk with me. All of it, the gate, the cellar, the wayhouse, the yard, and I want you to stop me every time I say something stupid." She wrote, "I cannot stop you. You can now," said the king. "That is what the word means." So they walked the house, and it took 4 hours, and it was the strangest afternoon of her life. She had expected him to nod at things. Instead, he climbed down into the cellar, put his hand on the cold wall, and asked why the West Range was drier. He counted the sacks himself, and got it wrong, and let her correct him with 2 fingers and a look. When the weigh-house clerk tried to hurry them past the standing scales, Emmerich stopped and asked him to weigh a sack of flour. The clerk's face did something Nerys had been watching men's faces do for 4 years, and had never once been able to make anybody else see. Emmerich said nothing about it. But at the door, he glanced back at the scales, and then at her, and one eyebrow went up, and she understood that he had seen exactly what she had seen. Nobody had ever seen the same thing as her before. That was the moment. Not the announcement, not the hall, not the king. On a crate in her scullery, it was standing in a doorway, in the smell of old flour, being agreed with by somebody who did not have to. She was furious about it. She had made an entire life out of not being seen, and it had taken him 1 afternoon to make her want to be, and she knew exactly how that ended for girls like her. They came back through the Undercroft at dusk because it was quicker. She wanted the old ledger. There was a discrepancy in the salt entries she wanted to set against the year before, and the older books were kept in the wall press at the bottom of the Undercroft stair. She went to them the way she had gone 100 times, without thinking, and took out the volume for the year before last. She knew before she had it open. A book knows how to fall open at a missing page the way a mouth knows a missing tooth. The autumn quarter was gone, not lost, not blotted, not water spoiled, cut out, close to the spine, with something very sharp and very steady. It was her own hand that had written it, and somebody had been down here in the dark with a razor. Nares. She did not answer, which was usual, but she also did not move, which was not. And Emmerich came back 3 steps up the Undercroft passage to see what had stopped her. "What is it?" She held out the ledger, open at the wound. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked up, and the pleasant open face he had been wearing all afternoon was simply not there anymore. What replaced it was quiet and very cold and did not belong to a man who sat on crates. "How many people have keys to this press?" She held up 2 fingers. "You," he said, "and the steward." She nodded, and something unpleasant moved in her stomach, and she pushed it away because there would be an explanation. There was always an explanation. That was when she smelled the lamp oil. It was wrong in a way she could not have explained to anybody. The Undercroft lamps were trimmed at the 4th hour, and again at the 10th, and it was neither, and the smell was fresh and wet, and much too strong, and it was coming from ahead of them, from the far door, the one that gave onto the kitchen yard, the one that had a bar across it that she herself had set at noon. She heard the bar come off. Afterwards she was never able to say what she had thought, because she had not thought anything. She simply turned and put both hands flat on the king's chest and shoved him backwards into the wall press alcove with everything she had. Something went past where his head had been. It hit the stone and did not sound like an arrow. It sounded heavier and wetter, and it burst, and the smell of oil trebled, and then a second one came, and there was light on the flagstones, running. "They are burning us out," Emmerich said, with what she considered inappropriate calm. She was already moving. There were 2 of them at the far door, dark against the yard, and she did not have a blade, because maids do not carry blades. So she took the thing that was in her hand, which was the ledger, 4 fingers thick and heavy as a paving stone, and she came out of the alcove low and fast, and swung it into the first man's face. He went down over his own feet. The second one was quicker. She saw the blade late, and got her forearm up in front of her, and it opened a shallow line from her wrist to her elbow. And she did not make any sound at all, because she never did. Then Emmerich of Halvorn came past her shoulder like a door coming off its hinges. She had never seen a wolf king move. Nobody had. He took the second man off his feet and into the wall, and the man's knife went skittering away across the flags, and the noise Emmerich made was not a shout, it was lower than that, and it went through the stone and up through her boots. A whistle cut across the yard, 2 notes, flat and clean. The man on the ground got up and both of them went, not scattering, not panicking, out through the door and left and gone, in the manner of men who have been told what to do if it goes wrong. Neri stood in the burning Undercroft with a ruined ledger in one hand and her sleeve going warm and wet to the fingers, and waited for the king to be afraid. He put the fire out with a horse blanket. He did it methodically, and he did not shout for the guard, and when it was done, he came back and took her wrist and turned her arm to the light and said something short under his breath. She pulled her arm back and reached for the slate one-handed, and wrote, "They came for you." "No," said Emmerich. She looked up. "Think," he said, and his voice was gentle, and it was the worst thing she had heard all day. "They came in through the far door, and they threw fire at the far end of the passage. That is not how you kill a man. That is how you close a way out." He took the slate out of her hand and set it down. "They were not standing between me and the door, Nares. The whole Undercroft had gone very quiet. They were standing between you and it. The fire in the Undercroft went into the household book, as an accident with a lamp. Nares knew, because she wrote it there herself, at the steward's instruction, in her own tidy hand. Farron stood over her while she did it. "You will want to leave this house," he said quietly. A cousin of mine keeps an inn on the South Road. You would be forgotten inside a year. He watched her set down the pen. He is not protecting you, girl. He is using you. And when he is finished, you will still be a maid, and one that everybody has looked at. She did not write anything. She had begun to notice how often Farron offered to take her somewhere. 3 weeks went by, and then a fourth. She learned the shape of being Luna, which was mostly the shape of being stared at. She sat at the small council, with the ledger open in front of her, and made 3 men change their figures without opening her mouth, and she could not get a single straight answer out of the king. She asked about the 2 men in the undercroft. He asked whether she had eaten. She wrote out the whistle, 2 notes, and pushed the slate at him, and told her that her handwriting was better than his chancellor's. She wrote, "Who wants me dead?" and he read it. And something went across his face like a shadow crossing a field. And then he smiled and said, "Everybody wants somebody dead. It is what courts are for." He gave her nothing. He gave her a great deal else. He learned her hands. That was the thing she could not forgive him for. Within a month, he could read her the way Farron never had in 6 years, the tilt of 2 fingers that meant no, the flat palm that meant wait, the stillness that meant she was angry. He started answering her before she reached for the slate. Once, at council, an old lord said something about the grain barges, and Emmerich said, without looking round, "My Luna disagrees," and she had not moved at all. Lady Vaska of Oran found her in the long gallery one evening, alone. "I have decided to be honest with you," Vaska said. "Since nobody else in this house intends to be." She looked nares over the way one looks at a horse one has been sold. "He will use you, and he will be kind about it, and you will not notice until it is finished. That is what he is. I have watched him do it to grown men." Nares held her eyes and did not write anything. "Good," said Vaska. "You do not flinch. That is something." And she went, and it took Nares the rest of the evening to understand that she had been paid a compliment, and threatened in one breath. That was the month she stopped sleeping properly. It was nothing that could be written down. It was his sleeve against her arm at the council table. It was coming out of the weighhouse into the rain, and finding him waiting with a cloak, and the fact that he did not put it round her, he simply held it out, because he had worked out that she could not bear being handled. She lay in a bed far too large for her, and thought about his hands, and was ashamed of herself, and thought about them anyway. On the last night of the month, she went down to the counting room late, and heard voices in the passage, and stopped without deciding to. Farron. And a man she did not know. "She has been beside him for a month," the stranger said. "How much does she remember?" "Nothing." Farron's voice was perfectly level. "She was 15. She has never spoken a word about it, and she never will. I have made sure of that." Pause. "You are very confident." "I have had 6 years," said Farron. "And she believes every single thing I tell her." She did not sleep at all. By the small hours she had gone through it 40 ways, and it came out the same every time. She had heard a man she loved describe her as a thing he had built. She had no proof, no page, no witness, and no voice. And there was exactly one person in Halvorn she could take it to. And she did not trust him either. She went to him anyway. Emmerich was in his study, with one lamp lit and a map of the northern roads under his hands. He looked up, and did not ask why she was there at 3 in the morning. She put the slate on the map. "What am I to you?" He read it, and did not answer straight away, which she had learned meant he was going to tell the truth and did not much want to. "Do you want the useful answer?" he said, "or the true one?" She tapped the slate twice. "The true one is that I have been lying awake for a month," Emmerich said, "working out how to want something without ruining it, and failing." He stood. "I am very good at wanting things at a distance. It is the only way I have been allowed to want anything." She rubbed the slate clean with her sleeve. Her hand was not steady. "Say the rest." "The rest is that you may put that slate down and walk out, and I will never raise it again, and nothing changes." He came round the desk slowly. the way one comes round a table towards something that might go. Or you may stay, and I will stop being careful, and I do not think I would be able to start again. For a while, the lamp did the only moving in the room, and Nerys, who had answered every question put to her for 6 years in chalk, looked down and understood that there was no word worth writing on it. She set it face down on the desk. Then she crossed the space between them and took hold of his shirt in both fists, and pulled. What she remembered afterwards came in pieces that would not sit in order. His hands, framing her jaw as though she might break, and then not carefully at all, the lamp going over and neither of them going after it, the discovery that she could make herself understood entirely by pressure and breath. She had spent her life unheard. She had never once considered that there might be a language nobody needed a voice for. She learned that he shook. That was the thing that undid her. The king of Halvorn, who had faced down 400 people and 2 men with knives without altering his expression, shook when she put her mouth to the hinge of his jaw, and she felt it go through him and thought wildly that she had done that. Later. The room was dark, the fire down to a red seam, and she lay with her cheek on his chest and let herself think it. This is not a scheme. He is not managing me. Whatever else is wrong in this house, this is the one true thing in it. She let herself believe it, for 4 hours, which was longer than she had let herself believe anything since she was 15. He was nearly asleep when he spoke. Nerys. His voice was thick with it. There is something I am going to have to tell you soon, not tonight. She waited, with her hand flat on his ribs, but his breathing had already gone long and slow, and she lay in the dark with her eyes open until the window went gray. The Karsk delegation arrived on the 11th of the month, with 60 horses and a chest of salt as a gift, which nobody but Nerys found funny. They had come to sign. Karsk held the northern passes, and Halvorn held the sea road. And for 2 generations, the two of them had circled each other over a treaty that neither could afford to sign badly. Lord Prevan came at the head of it, a small, tidy man with a habit of writing things down, and Nerys liked him immediately for it. The reckoning feast was held on the 3rd night. She stood at the top of the great stair in dark green, with her hair up and the household keys still on her belt, because she had refused to take them off, and the hall below her went quiet. In a way it had not gone quiet on the night he named her. Not shock, something worse and better. Assessment. Bethany was at the foot of the stair with a tray. She looked up at Nerys, and her whole face rearranged itself into radiant fondness. "Oh, look at you," she breathed. "I always said—" Didn't I always say she had not? Nerys went past her and thought, with mild wonder, that Bethany probably believed it. Ossian was worse to watch, because Ossian could not manage a face at all. He stood against the wall with his ears scarlet and stared at the floor as she passed, and she understood that he had been rehearsing something for 4 weeks and had lost it entirely. Emeric met her at the bottom of the stair and offered his arm. "Every man in this hall," he murmured, "has just worked out that he has been served wine by the future of this kingdom for 6 years and is now doing arithmetic on everything he said in front of you." She let one corner of her mouth move. "Yes," he said, "that is what I thought too." They danced badly. He was competent, and she had never learned, and halfway through he gave up entirely and walked her out onto the north terrace where the noise thinned and the cold came up off the gardens. "I want to tell you something," Emeric said, "and I am going to do it quickly, before I lose my nerve." She turned to face him. "I was 19 when my father died. 19 and the 3rd son and my 2 brothers went inside the same winter, and I was crowned in the spring, and everybody in that hall knew perfectly well that I had never been taught anything." He was looking out at the dark. "So I learned one trick. I learned to be certain, it does not matter about what. Be certain in a pleasant voice, and men will follow you off a cliff, and the day you are not certain, they start deciding things without you." His hands had gone still on the balustrade. "I have been certain for 6 years," he said. "I do not know what I am like underneath it. I do not know if there is anything under it at all. and every single person I have ever spoken to has been reporting to somebody, and I stopped minding about that a long time ago, and then you turned up." He looked at her. "You are the only person in my life who has never wanted a single thing from me, and I have absolutely no idea what to do with it." She took out the slate. It took her some time. "You are wrong about one thing." He read it and waited. She wiped it and wrote, "I want something." "Say it." She looked at the chalk for a while, and then wrote 3 words and turned it round, and they were not the 3 words either of them had been expecting. "Stop being certain." Emeric of Helvorn looked at that for a long moment and did not say anything clever at all. The terrace was very quiet. Nerys did not reach for the slate. She reached for his face, and she put her hand flat along his jaw the way he had learned to read, and she held it there. And then, from somewhere in her chest, without permission, a sound came out of her. It was not a word. It was small and rough and torn at the edges, and it was a laugh, and it was the first noise she had made in 6 years. They both went absolutely still. Emeric's face did something she would remember for the rest of her life. It came apart. There was no charm anywhere in it. He looked at her the way a man looks at a door that has opened in a wall he has been living against. "Nerys," he whispered, and she was terrified. It came up through her like cold water. Everything Ferran had built into her. 6 years of a hand on her shoulder, and a voice saying that, as long as she stayed quiet, nobody would come. She stepped back and fumbled the slate out and wrote with a hand that would barely hold the chalk. It was nothing. "Do not." She turned it round. She watched him read it. She watched the light go out of his face the way a lamp goes out, all at once, and something in her screamed and did not reach her mouth. "Of course," Emeric said. "Nothing. You are quite right." He offered his arm again, and it was the arm of a king, and they went back in. She saw the man 40 seconds later. It was nothing anyone else could have seen. A serving man at the second table, pouring for the Karsk delegation, in the livery of the house. And Nerys had known every face that came through that gate for 6 years, every carter, every scullion, every temporary hand hired for a feast, because it was her job to know them. She had never seen him before in her life. He was moving up the table towards the high seats. He had a jug in his hand, and he was pouring for nobody, and he was moving towards the king. And Nerys opened her mouth to shout, and nothing came out. She would think about that for the rest of her life. The one moment, out of all the moments in 6 years, when the thing she had lost actually mattered. There was no time to write. There was no time to find a hand and drag it. There was a hall of 400 people, and one voice missing from it, and it was hers. So she went over the table. She took the second table at a run, straight through the plate and the glass, and hit the man in the small of the back with her shoulder and put him down across the boards. The jug went up and over and came down on the flags, and the smell that came off it was not wine, it was almond, and something under the almond, sweetish and wrong. She had smelled it once before. A physician had come to the kitchens in her first week at Sarnhold and made every girl in the room lean over a dish of it and told them that this was the only lesson that mattered and that they would forget it inside a month. She had been 15. She had not forgotten anything since she was 15. The hall came apart. Guards on him in 4 seconds. Lord Previn of Karsk on his feet, with his little book still in his hand. And Nerys on her knees, in the rack of a table with her palm cut open, on somebody's cup, and the king, already there, hauling her up by the elbows. "Look at me, Nerys. Look at me." She was shaking. "Not a word," Emeric said, low and fast, and then he heard it, and his mouth twisted at the cruelty of the phrase. "Not a sign? Nothing. Do you understand me? There is a foreign envoy 9 feet away, and if the story that leaves this hall is that Helvorn cannot keep poison off its own high table, that treaty is dead, and the passes close and we are at war by the thaw." His grip tightened. "It was a thief. It was a drunk. It was a man who tripped. Give me until morning." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. He kissed her forehead, quickly, and turned and went back into that hall, and was charming for 2 more hours. And Nerys watched him do it and thought about a man who had told her on a terrace that he did not know what was underneath. She gave him a count of 100 after he left. Then she followed. He did not go to his chambers. He went down. Down the west stair and along the kitchen passage and past the counting room, and Nerys came after him, with her shoes in her hand, and she knew where he was going 3 turns before he got there, and she did not want to be right. The steward's rooms. The door was ajar and there was a lamp lit inside, and Ferran was not in it, because Ferran was still upstairs, being useful in the hall. Emeric of Halvorn was behind the steward's desk with the drawer out and a bundle of papers in his hand. He looked up. For a moment neither of them moved at all. "Nerys," he said, very quietly. "Do not go. Whatever you are about to think, I will tell you the whole of it, right now, tonight, but do not go." She did not go. She came in and shut the door, which was worse, and stood with her back against it. "Ask me," Emeric said. She lifted the slate. Her hand was steady now, which surprised her. "How long?" "4 years." He set the papers down. 4 years since I first thought there was something wrong with the money in this house, and 2 since I was certain it was him. And 11 months since I understood that I could not touch him. She wrote. "Why not?" "Because Ferran has been steward of Sarnhold for 19 years, and every clerk, every carter, every gateman and cellarman in this palace was put there by him." He rubbed his eyes. "Because he has the keys and the accounts and the loyalty of 200 people, and if I arrested the steward of my own house on the word of the king and produced nothing, half my court would decide I was a boy having a tantrum and the other half would decide I was hiding something. I needed a record he did not control." She looked at the open drawer. "There was nothing in it," Emeric said. "There never is. String, candle stubs and a fair copy of the accounts he wants found. What you saw in my hand is mine. 4 years of it. I came down tonight to see whether he had finally got careless, and he is not." The room went very cold. She wrote it slowly, and she had to stop twice. "You needed my ledger." "Yes. So you named me." There was a pause that went on slightly too long. "Yes," said Emeric. She had known. She had known since the drawer. It was still like going through ice. Every kindness of the last 2 months turned over in her hands and showed her its other side. The seat at council, the keys she had been allowed to keep, the care he had taken never to put a hand on her without leaving room to step back. All of it was exactly what a careful man would do who needed a frightened woman to stay in a house and keep writing in a book. "I could not simply take the book," he said. "The moment I took it, he would know, and the book would burn, and so would the girl who wrote it. I needed to put you somewhere he could not reach, and I needed a reason that no man in Halvorn could argue with. And I had one, night and 400 witnesses, and I used them." His voice had gone rough. "It began as that. I will not stand here and tell you it did not. It stopped being that in about a week, and I have no way to prove that to you, and I know exactly how it sounds." She looked at the papers on the desk. She wrote, "There is more." He did not answer. She hit the desk flat with her palm, hard enough to rattle the lamp, and it was the loudest thing she had done in 6 years, and Emeric flinched. "Yes," he said, "there is more." He came round the desk, and he did not try to touch her. "6 years ago the house of Ilvain burned," he said. "Small holding, north edge of the salt country. Nobody of any importance. The report said a lamp. 14 dead. There was 1 survivor, a daughter, 15 years old, and my father's steward went up to see to the matter, and came back with a kitchen girl he had taken pity on." He stopped. "Nerys, your name is Nerys of Ilvain. When I stood in that hall and told them the crown had known your name before you came to this house, it was the only true thing I said all day." Something at the back of her skull came off its hinges. It did not arrive as a picture. It came as a smell first, hot pitch and burning barley, and then as the particular sound a slate roof makes when the beams beneath it let go all at once. Then a hand across her mouth. not a stranger's hand. A hand she knew, that smelled of ink, holding her flat against the wet ground behind the dairy while men walked past 4 feet away in the dark, and a voice against her ear saying the only thing anybody said to her that entire night. Not a sound, girl, not one sound, ever, or they will come back for you. She had kept that promise for 6 years. She had kept it so completely that she had stopped knowing it was a promise, and had come to believe it was simply the shape she had been born in. The floor was a long way away. I found it 2 years ago, in the old rolls, Emmerich said. A pension paid out of the crown purse to the House of Ilvain stopped the quarter after the fire. I went looking for who stopped it. It was signed by the steward. He swallowed. The House of Ilvain held the salt road. Every wagon that has gone missing out of my stores for 4 years has gone north up a road that stopped having anybody to watch it the night your family died. She was not crying. She noted that distantly, as a fact about somebody else. She wrote, and the chalk broke, and she wrote with the stub, "You knew for 2 years. Yes. And you let me pour your wine. Yes." She looked up. Why? And Emmerich of Halvorn, who had an answer for everything, took a very long time to find one. "Because you had made yourself so quiet," he said, "and I could not work out whether you did not remember or whether you had decided not to, and I was frightened that if I put it in front of you before I could prove it, you would go to him with it. Because you loved him." His jaw worked. "And I was right about that. You would have. You would have taken it straight to Pharaon and asked him to explain it, and he would have explained it, and by the spring there would have been a very sad accident." It was true. That was the unbearable part. It was completely true. He picked up the papers and held them out to her. "Read them. All of it. Do not take my word for a single line. You never should have." She did not take them. She could not have read one word of them. She wrote instead, and had to do it twice, because the first attempt came out in a hand she did not recognize as her own. "You had 2 years to choose how to tell me. You chose tonight. Yes, you did not choose. You were caught." He did not answer that either, and under it, older and colder, the thing that had been waiting in her since the night in the hall stood up and spoke in her own voice. "There it is. You knew. Men like that do not want women like you. They want what you can carry." It was Ferran's voice. She noticed that, distantly, the way one notices a wrong figure in a column, and filed it, and could do nothing with it at all. She wrote one line, and turned it round and did not look at him while he read it. "I was the ledger. Nothing else." "That is not true. You have not said one honest thing to me since the night you named me." "Nares." His voice cracked straight down the middle. "There is a poisoner loose in this house, and the Karsk envoy leaves in 3 days, and I have nobody. Do you understand me? Nobody in this palace I can put in a room with that man except you. I need you." Nothing in the room marked it. The lamp did not gutter. The papers did not stir. She had waited 6 years for one person to want her for something that was not work, and she had got as far as the last hour of it before the bill came in. The slate was already in her apron pocket. She did not take it out. Again. She held his eyes, and the lamp, and the open drawer, and the papers, with her whole life in them, and she thought, distinctly, that of all the things he might have chosen to say, he had chosen that one. Not "I am sorry." Not "I cannot lose you." "I need you." She opened the door and went out into the passage and left him standing behind another man's desk. He was waiting for her at the bottom of the west stair. Of course he was. He had waited at the bottom of stairs for her for 6 years. "Girl," Farron came forward, with his hands out. "Look at you. What has he done?" And Nares, who had made her first sound in 6 years on a terrace an hour ago, went to him, because her body had been going to him since she was 15 and had never been told to stop. He took her by the shoulders and read it off her face the way he always had. "He told you about Ilvain," he said softly. She went rigid. "I have carried it for 6 years." Ferran's eyes were wet. I have wanted to tell you every day of your life. The man who ordered it is standing in this palace, and I could not put a child in front of him." He gripped harder. It was Emmerich. His father was dying. The Salt Road was worth more than a small northern house, and a boy of 19 made his first decision, and your mother burned for it. The passage was very quiet, and something in Neri's went still. Not calm. Still, the way she went over a wrong figure in a column. Emmerich was 19 when his father died. Ferran had that exactly right, and Ferran had not been on the terrace to hear it said. But Emmerich had said something else. His father and both his brothers went inside the same winter, and he was crowned in the spring that followed. Ylvain burned in the autumn. Neris knew the month the way she knew her own hands. The autumn came first. Then the winter, then the crowning. Which meant that on the night her house went up, Emmerich of Helvorn had been 18, the third son of a living king, with 2 brothers between him and anything at all, and no more standing to order a raid on the Salt Road than the boy who held his horse. Farron had put the crown on 6 months too early. Every man in Halvorn dates a king from his crowning, and Farron had never once had to make the sum work. She had spent 6 years making sums work. She looked up into the face of the only man who had ever taken care of her and understood, without any noise at all, that he was lying to her. "So you see," Ferran said gently, "what has to happen now?" She waited. "The Karsk envoy sits down with the council at noon, and Previn will not sign with a king he cannot trust." Farron's thumbs moved on her shoulders. "It cannot come from me. They will say a servant is reaching above himself. It has to come from you, the Luna, the survivor of Ylvain. Stand up in that room and tell them what he did, and Halvorn will have a regency by evening, and there are good houses ready to hold it steady," she thought. House Oren. And the Salt Road. She made her face crumple, which took nothing at all, and nodded. "Good girl," said Farron. The council chamber at noon held 22 people. Lord Previn of Karsk sat at the near end with his little book open. Lady Vaska of Oren stood at the back against the shutters. Bettany was at the door with a water jug and Ossian behind her with the second, because somebody always has to hold the jugs. Emmerich was at the head of the table. He looked up when she came in behind Ferran, and for half a heartbeat, his whole face opened. Then it closed. "My lords," Ferran bowed envoy, "it grieves me to bring this before you." He laid it out beautifully. He had been laying it out for 19 years. "That is a lie," Emmerich said. "Every word he would say so," said Ferran. "But the king's own Luna was born in that house." He turned and the whole room turned with him. "Neris of Ylvain. It is plain to everyone here what she feels for him. No one can say she has reason to speak against him." He held out his hand. "Tell them what he did." 22 faces came round onto her. She stood in the doorway with her hands empty and the slate in her apron, and the whole of Halvorn waited, exactly as it had waited on the night she was named. And the old cold came up her spine and put its hand over her mouth. "Say nothing, and nobody will come." She looked at Farron. She looked at Emmerich, who was not asking her for anything at all. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her across a hall full of daughters, steady and unhurried, and she understood that he had already decided to lose. Neris of Ylvain opened her mouth. The sound that came out was not a voice. It was a ruined door being forced. It scraped, and it caught. And half the room did not understand that it was speech until the second word. "My name," she said, "is Neris of Ylvain." Bettany dropped the water jug. Nobody looked at it. Nobody in that chamber looked at anything but her. He was 18. Her throat was tearing. She did not care. "When my house burned, his father was alive. Both his brothers were alive. He was not crowned until the spring after." She turned her head slowly and looked at the man who had raised her. "You said 19. You said a king." Farron's face did not move at all. "6 wagons of salt," she said. "The autumn before last. In at the kitchen gate on the 14th, weighed and marked to the West Range. Never entered to the winter stores. Bought back in the spring at a bad price from a factor in Karsk. Every word cost her something and she spent it. 10 times in 4 years. I wrote every one. You told me every time that it went up the chain. She is unwell, Farron said to the room. She has never spoken in her life. I know, said Nerys. You made sure of it. She looked at Lord Prevan. The autumn quarter of the ledger before last was cut out with a razor 8 weeks ago. 2 people hold keys to that press. Her voice gave out, and she dragged it back. You do not need the page, I wrote it. I remember all of it. Send men to the Undercroft press and the steward's rooms now, while he is standing here and cannot reach either. Then a search costs him nothing, said Prevan of Karsk, and closed his little book. Farron moved. He was fast for a man of his years, and she saw the shape of the thing in his hand, and had time to think that she knew that handle, that it had cut string on his desk for 6 years. He did not reach her. Lady Vasca of Oran came off the shutters and put a chair into his legs, and Ferran went down across it, and Ossian, who had never done a brave thing in his life, dropped the second water jug and sat on him. Then there were guards, and noise, and it was over. Afterwards, when they had taken him out, Vasca straightened her sleeves and looked at Nerys with distaste. I still do not like you, she said. Nerys nodded. He killed a great many people to hold that road. My father has bought salt off it for 4 years without asking where it came from, and I have known for 2. Vasca's chin came up. I am not sorry for how I have spoken to you. I am simply not letting a steward decide who rules. Halvorn, and she walked out. The chamber emptied. Prevan went writing. The council went out in tight arguing knots. And then it was Emeric and Nerys, and an overturned chair and 2 water jugs in pieces on the floor. You saved my kingdom, he said. His voice was not steady. You saved my life. After everything, you still. I came to stop a thief. Her voice was a wreck. It hurt to use. She used it. That is all. Nerys. He came 1 step. I love you. I have loved you since the night you counted casks in front of 400 people who could not see you. You knew my name for 2 years. He stopped. You knew what I was, and what he did to me, and you let me hand him his gloves every morning, she said. You gave me a title so a book would be safe. You gave me the truth on the night I found you in his desk, and not 1 hour before. She had to stop and breathe. You did not lie about loving me. I believe you love me. It does not fix it. Tell me what does. Nothing, said Nerys. Nothing does. That is what it means. She turned at the door. I am glad you are alive, she said. You will be a good king. I cannot be in a room with you. And she left. And this time she did it out loud on her own feet with a voice. 7 months later, Nerys of Ylvena held the whole of Sarnhold in her 2 hands and was extremely good at it. Warden of the house they called it. A title, dug out of the old rolls, because nobody could think of a better one. She had the keys, all of them now. She had 4 clerks, 3 new gatemen, a set of standing scales that were checked in public on the 1st of every month, and a ledger that anybody in Halvorn was entitled to come and read. Farron sat in a cell under the old fort. The salt road ran north again, with the crown's men on it. The Karsk Treaty had been signed in the spring, and Lord Prevan wrote to her twice a season about weights and measures, which she enjoyed more than she was prepared to admit. She spoke now. That was the strangest part. Not much, and not easily. Her voice came out low and worn, and it tired quickly, and there were days it did not come at all. And the physicians said it might always be so. She had stopped waiting for it to be otherwise. Some things that are broken at 15 do not come back at 22. They simply become the shape you are, and she was miserable. And everybody in the palace knew it. Emeric did not send flowers. She would have thrown flowers in the moat, and he had worked that out. What he sent was corrections. The first came a fortnight after the council chamber. A clerk brought her a folded note, and inside it was a single line in that fast, slanted hand, saying that the East Barracks had been receiving 9 sacks against a requisition of 12 since before she was born. The next week it was the second gate. The week after that, it was the boot allowance. And the one after that, a pension that had been stopped in the wrong year and was now being paid back with 4 years of arrears, to a widow in the lower city every week for 7 months. Every one of them, something she had written in her ledger and been told, went up the chain. She kept them. She had not decided to. She simply found, in the 4th month, that there were 31 of them in the drawer where she kept the seal, in order, and that she had known the number without counting. He never signed them. He never asked her anything. He never once mentioned himself. And when they were in a room together at council or in the yard, he did the hardest thing he had ever done in his life. He said nothing. He had learned, at some point, that she did not want to be talked at, and so the most talkative man in Halvorn sat 6 feet away from her twice a week for 7 months in complete silence, and let her work. It was very nearly unbearable. Twice she looked up and caught him watching her hands. Both times, he looked away first. Both times, she wished he had not. The household had opinions. "You should hear him out," said Ashen, in the 2nd month, having grown considerably in the estimation of everyone including himself. He had also at some point stopped calling her anything at all, and had begun the slow public agony of saying her name correctly and getting it wrong and going scarlet and trying again. He had never once apologized for the mouse. Nerys had decided she preferred it that way. An apology would have been a thing he did for himself. In the 5th month he asked her, going scarlet the whole way through it, whether she might teach him to keep a gatebook. She said yes. He was appalling at it, and got better. Bettany had reinvented history entirely. "We were always close," she told the new maids at length, within earshot. "I was the only one who was kind to her, you know, in the old days." Nerys, passing, said nothing, and Bettany beamed at her with total sincere warmth, and Nerys understood that Bettany would go to her grave believing it, and that there are people in the world who will never once know what they have done. Vaska of Oren, who had called her furniture, came to the counting room every month with her father's salt accounts open for inspection, and was rude to her for the entire visit, and had twice put down a lord who spoke slightingly of the warden in a public room. "I do not like you," she said when Nerys once tried to thank her. "I know." Good. In the 6th month a letter came that was different. It was longer than the corrections, and it was signed, Nerys. "I have been told correctly that a man who keeps asking is not being patient. He is being loud in a slower way. You have given me your answer, and I have been refusing to hear it because hearing it costs me something. That is appetite with good manners on it. I am going to stop. The house is yours to run, and I will keep out of your way in it. I am sorry, not for loving you, for what I spent to get it." At the bottom he had written that he would be naming his cousin's boy as heir at midwinter, and that there would be no Luna. She read it 4 times, and the last line more than the rest. "Not for loving you, for what I spent to get it." It was the first thing he had ever put in front of her that did not have a use. "This is what you wanted," she told herself, and went back to work, and found that the counting room had somehow got very large. 11 days later, Ossian came through her door without knocking, which he had never done, and behind him was Bettany, and both of them were the particular gray color of people who have made a very large mistake. "He is gone," Ossian said. The pen was still in her hand, not in his chambers, not in the yard. "His horse is in the stable, and his sword is on the stand, and the bed has not been slept in." Ossian's voice went up. "Nobody has seen him since the 9th bell last night." Nerys was on her feet without having decided to stand, and then she did the thing she had not done in 7 months. The thing that had cost her a house and a childhood and 6 years of her own voice. "Get me the gatebook," she said out loud, in front of 5 people. "Every rider out since dusk. Wake the north stable. Nobody rings a bell and nobody says the word king in a corridor. Go." They went, and they went fast, because it had been an order out loud, in a voice. the gatebook gave her nothing. No horse, no escort, no name. The north postern gave her a boot mark in the frost, and a gateman who had let a man in a plain cloak walk out on his own at the 10th bell, and had not thought to stop him because the man had said good evening by name. She stood in the freezing yard, with the book open in her hands, and thought, the way she thought about a column of figures. Not where would a king go, where would he go? And she knew. She rode north for 4 hours in the dark with 6 of her own gatemen strung out behind her, and the cold coming up through her gloves, and she came over the last rise as the sky went gray, and she pulled up. She had never once been back. In 6 years, she had not let herself work out how far it was, and it turned out to be 4 hours, which meant that every day of those 6 years, she had been 4 hours from her own front door, and had arranged not to know it. The house of Ilvain had been a black ruin in her head for 6 years. It was not a ruin. The north wall was up and pointed. There was new timber stacked and covered. There was a roof over the kitchen end, and the beginnings of one over the hall, and a great deal of very careful, very expensive stonework, and a low light burning inside a building that had been a grave the last time she saw it. Emeric of Halvorn was sitting on the front step in a plain cloak, with his elbows on his knees, watching the sun come up over the salt country. She got down, she walked up. He heard her at 10 paces and did not turn round. 7 months, he said. I did not intend for you to find out. I was going to leave it to you in a will and let it be somebody else's problem. She could not speak. This time, it was not the old reason. There was a widow at the gatehouse who remembered your mother, he said, and a man in the village who put your father's horses out to grass and never told anyone. I have their names written down for you inside. I did not think you would want them from me, so I wrote them down. He was still not looking at her. You did not come here to be found, she managed. No. Then why? Because it is the only place in the world, said Emeric, where I could sit still and not be certain about anything, and nobody would be harmed by it. Neri stood in the frost in front of her mother's house, and looked at the man who had used her and rebuilt it, and understood that both of those were true at once, and always would be, and that she had a choice about which of them she was going to live in. She sat down on the step beside him. They watched the light come up the valley for a long time. I am not forgiven, he said at last. It was not a question. No, she said. You are not forgiven. You are something else. He turned his head. Then he had gone very thin, and there was a great deal of gray in his hair that had not been there in the spring. What? You are the man who did it anyway. She stood up. Her legs did not want to hold her, and did. Come home, she said. There is a hall full of people who have been waiting 7 months to find out how this ends, and I am tired of being the only one who knows. The great hall of Sarnhold held 400 people again on the first day of winter, because word had gone round the city in 6 hours the way word does. Neris of Ilvain, warden of the house, walked up the middle of it in her own good grey, with the keys on her belt past the tables she had poured at, and the screen she had hidden behind, past Ashen gone scarlet at the wall, past Bettany openly weeping and telling everyone she had known all along, past Vaska of Oren, who inclined her head 1/4 of an inch, which from Vaska was a standing ovation. She went up onto the dais, where no maid had ever stood. She turned round and looked at 400 people, and the hall went quiet in that long collapsing way, table by table, out to the doors. Her voice was low and worn, and it would never be anything else. My lords, said Neris, my ladies, some of you have known me 6 years. Most of you have never once asked my name. Nobody breathed. I am not going to make a speech. I am very bad at them, and I have not much voice to spend. She let that sit, and somewhere at the third table, somebody laughed and stopped, appalled at himself. So I will do it the way it was done to me. So? She put out her hand, and Emeric of Halvorn came up out of the crowd, where he had been standing among them like anybody else. and took it. "This man," she said, "is mine." She had meant to say more. She had written 4 sentences that morning and put them in the fire. In the end, it was 3 words, and 3 words in that voice cost her more than an hour of speech would have cost anyone else, and every person in that room understood it. The noise that came up out of that hall was not the noise they had made the first time. It started at the server's wall, where the people who carry the jugs were standing, and it came inward, and it took the room. Emmerich was looking at her as though the roof had come off. "You cannot simply announce a person," he said over the noise. Nares of Ilvain looked up at the man who had announced her in front of 400 people, without asking her first, and let him wait for it, and enjoyed it more than anything in her life. "Take it back then," she said. And Emmerich of Halvorn, who had spent 6 years being certain in a pleasant voice, and 7 months saying nothing at all, put his forehead against hers, in front of the whole court of Halvorn, and gave her the only word he had: no. They were married in the spring, at Ilvain, under a roof he had put on with a good deal of help and a certain amount of falling off it. It was a small wedding, by the standards of kings. The gatemen came. Previn of Karsk came and wrote it all down. Ocean got the name right once in public and had to leave the room. She kept the keys. She kept the ledger. She never got her voice back properly, and she stopped minding, because the thing about a voice that costs you something is that you only spend it on what it is worth, and she found she had a great deal to say, and all the time in the world to say it in. And once a year, on the anniversary of a certain feast, the warden of the house goes down to the great hall on the night of the naming and pours the wine herself for 1 hour, badly, while the king of Halvorn watches from the high table and pretends to be attending to somebody else.